Well, thank you for taking the time to sit with me today. I just want to ask you a couple of questions for my fellowship. So, of all the things I've read about you, what moved me most was your family story of America. Your parents immigrated to this country, and they made a better life for themselves and for you. Your mother served as New York City councilwoman, planning, mobilizing, and advocating for helping others. Would you say that was what led you to your career in politics?
I think it was a combination of things, quite frankly. I was fortunate to have a mother who was an activist throughout my childhood and who eventually went on to run for public office. But one thing a lot of folks don't know is that I was already an adult at the point where my mother actually became an elected official. I think it was just a combination of things in my environment. I think it was my college education that also had me make that turn. I was on an activist campus where the divestment movement from South Africa was an ever-present movement on campus. And then just being a New Yorker and a lot of what was taking place in the late 70s, early 80s, I think helped inform my passion for public service. And then, you know, the added bonus was having a mother, a home, and a family that were committed to civic engagement and political activism.
Makes sense. Such a fascinating story. I read that you were a science major and that you wanted to be a pediatrician, but ultimately your heart just kind of led you onto a journey for public service. I know that you just told us that you were an adult when your mother joined the city council, but can you tell me more about? I think you kind of answered this, but what your path to running for office was like, more particularly just a campaign, raising money.
Well, I'm going to share a couple of things with you. I think my commitment to the community was the driving force. But then there were just a whole host of coincidental, some would say, perhaps destiny types of events in my life that led me on this path. So I got to the fork in the road around what I would pursue in college. And I mentioned just previously that there was this movement for divestments from South Africa on my campus. So I'm a science major on campus during this time where there's a lot of discussion about apartheid and what our campus could do to make the difference. And what we decided was divestment of all of our funds from Oberlin College, from any funds that were doing business with South Africa. And I think that was a eureka moment. I did more of my studies in government. I shifted my major, the whole nine, as a result of that. But that was, I think, a moment of crystallization of some other activities that had happened during my childhood and growing up in Brooklyn, New York. There was always sort of an activist environment around me, just making sure that families and community receive the services and the advocacy that they deserve. And our household was a hotbed of all of that activity. A number of times I remember my mom hosting fundraisers for candidates that were trailblazers in their own right in our community that were running for office, art sales, barbecues. We would go to political strategy meetings, and I would be a young child with my crayons and my lunchbox after school, sitting in the room. So I think it was just the environment in which I was raised. And then I became a staffer. A lot of people don't, I don't think that's like right on my resume, but that was where I began my political involvement, because I wanted to know more about public service. So I started in a nonprofit environment, community-based nonprofit, and then decided when the opportunity was offered to me to go to the state legislature as a staffer. So I was a staffer to both an assemblywoman and a state senator. So that's why I always tell my staff here, you know, there's nothing you can get away with that I haven't already done. But, you know, it was just looking at the various pathways to serve people, particularly because I felt like a great beneficiary of a wonderful community that really supported and encouraged me, and I knew I wanted to give back. I didn't know ultimately that it would take this route, but I always knew and felt driven to give back. And so that was sort of the pathway that I took to get here ultimately.
Wow. I'm completely enamored. So what are some of the challenges you still face today? I know you've been representing your district for 7 years now, and I know that you're very involved and take a lot of your phone calls, so your constituents love you. What kind of challenges do you still face today, even 7 years later?
Yeah, it's 7 years in Congress, but I spent 6 years in the city council within the same congressional district. So in total, it's been 13 years in elective office in this constituency. And mind you, my mother served 10 years prior to me being elected to office in this same community. I think the challenges are always the challenge of being in a male-dominated profession. You know, women aren't seen quite the same in the political arena. And we go about our policy making and decision making, I would say, a bit different. We often are not as well financed as our male counterparts, and we spend an inordinate amount of time raising money so that we can, you know, further our political agenda, whether it's running for re-election or making sure that particular political issues are out there in the community and people are aware of what is taking place, what's happening here in Washington, and so forth, and how it impacts on them. So it's those challenges that I think you overcome when, one, you come from a working class community like I do, two, when you're a woman, three, when you're a woman of color. All of those dynamics come into play, and that's why I stay so close to my constituency, because for me the pathway was not one of wealth, it was one of people power, of working on the ground, organizing with the community, making sure that I have my finger on the pulse of their desires and being able to articulate that here in Washington.
Wow. Do you have any advice for young women like myself who are interested in a career or path to public service?
What I share with people is that public service is not celebrity. And I try to get people to see the difference between the two. Public service is actually a verb, right? It means that you have to be doing something to be serving, and it can't be self-serving.
Right.
So one of the things that I suggest oftentimes is working with a local organization, you know, that is doing something to change people's lives, whether it's a food pantry, tenant advocacy group, a green movement in your local community. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where people's lives are being transformed. And to the extent that you engage at that level, people appreciate you. And they know you as someone who is willing to put themselves on the line, to move out of their comfort zone, to make a difference for themselves. Public service, to me, provides a unique gratification that only comes from serving others. And so if there is any self-aggrandizement that comes from this type of profession for me, it's knowing that someone else's life has been really transformed because I was able to do something to make that happen. And so that is what I would suggest to anyone who's seeking to serve the public. Find something that you're passionate about and that you can demonstrate through action that will help to serve someone else.
Oh, well, thank you so much again for taking time to speak to me about all these issues. I tell you all the time, but I really respect and admire the work that you do, and you made a difference in my life, just me being here these few short weeks and being able to participate in this legislative process and just this congressional movement that's going on. So thank you again. And
Well, thank
won't
you.
take up too much more of your time.
I just want to encourage you to, just stay focused. Philly needs you. They need all your talent. They've made an investment in you, whether you know it or not, whether it was through public school or whatever. Maximize on that and let folks know that you're grateful for it. And I think you'll go far.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did you get this?